Today, what I wanted to talk about is something that I've been working on for a little while now. Okay, so I took a break from playing the bassoon, and during that break, I was cooking. I was cooking in professional kitchens. I even worked for a Michelin-starred chef. I did some really cool stuff, and I had a blast. But at the end of it, I decided I was going to come back to music, and I decided I was going to play the bassoon again. But when I started playing the bassoon again, I realized I didn't have the same abilities that I used to have. I had lost certain things. I kind of lost my ability to play in time. My sense of pulse had disappeared. And I was like, what the heck? This was never a problem before, but now it was. Other things too, it's the whole feeling of how I was playing was all wrong. And so I decided, I'm not gonna give up. I knew what it took to become a good cook, right? To work your way up in kitchens and develop that skill. And for me, the biggest thing I found was persistence, just keeping going and not being afraid to put yourself in situations that are going to require growth. So with music, I said to myself, I'm just going to go for it. I believe that I can get there. I'm starting off in a place that's worse than before, skill-wise, but in another way, maybe I'm starting off from a place that's a little better because I know what it's like to, develop over a long period of time, and I know where that can take me. So I started working on it. I started trying to figure it out, with Pulse. I started trying to come up with solutions, how do I get this pulse back? What is it that I'm missing? And I just kept on experimenting, and over time, I came up with a lot of solutions. And eventually, I got to a point to where I was kind of, as good as I was before, but I was still coming up with these solutions. I was still coming up with new ways to get better in a way that maybe before I hadn't. I was kind of on this self-directed learning adventure with my instrument. And yeah, it's been 7 years now. 7 years since I came back to my instrument. Yeah, been a long time. I've gotten an undergraduate degree and a master's degree. And I teach now, I play now. But the thing is, I'm still growing. I'm still coming up with new ways to grow, new ways to solve problems. And that's been, I think, the most fun part of this journey is solving problems. Yeah. I've really enjoyed that. In the past couple of years, I started to put some of these ideas together in new ways that were kind of unlocked by this class I took in my master's. It was a class where we learned how to write a research paper, how to do research. And it was in the process of writing this research paper about memory in music, where I started to take all these different solutions that I had and put them together and understand them in a new way. And yeah, it just, my understanding of how to approach learning music changed completely, dramatically. It didn't change my playing overnight, but my approach sure changed. And over time, I started implementing this new approach, and yeah, my playing did start changing. And when you implement anything new, a lot of times it's like, it's not just a straight shot up, it's not just only benefits. Like sometimes you're kind of starting over when you're using a new approach. But, it was going well enough, and, I could see there was something there, so I kept going with it. And, eventually it led me to something else. It led me to a new idea that came out of, again, research. I found out, because I was trying to put my finger on something. Like, the research about memory brought me somewhere. I realized that music, like everything we're doing with music, we're learning to remember music. We're learning to remember, what our technique needs to do. We're learning to remember the emotion of a piece of music. We're learning to remember the information on the score. And not only that, but, I knew that when you connect different memories together, it makes those memories more powerful. Like, it makes the memory stronger, it makes it stick better. But then I realized, well, yeah, they should be connected. Like, why should I have one memory of sound and then one memory of what my fingers need to do, and then one memory of what the musical information on the page should be? It should be connected. And then I came across this thing that just blew it wide open for me. It's called ecological dynamics. And it's this thing that's kind of small still, but it's starting to blow up in the world of sports psychology. In the sports world, they're taking these concepts from this field called ecological dynamics. And they're dramatically changing the approach to learning sports, to learning skill, to skill development. But nobody has applied this to music yet. And it connected in a way to my research on memory, because it was all about, here's I think my favorite concept from ecological dynamics, and it is called self-organization. It's the idea that the body can self-organize. And there's this other thing called the constrained action hypothesis. And it's that if you try to micromanage what your body is doing, you're getting in the way of an automatic process that your body does, and you're making all of your movements worse, essentially. You're destroying the connection between what your body is doing, can do naturally, and what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to play, the music you're trying to play. Okay, so basically, the idea is when you focus on the end goal, the thing you're trying to achieve. In the case of a musician, what are you trying to focus on? What are you trying to achieve? It's the music. So when you focus on the music, when you try to make the music sound a certain way, to make it sound how you imagine it should sound, how you want it to sound, and you let go of conscious control of your body, of your fingers, of your embouchure, of your voice, when you let go of conscious control of that, and you just focus on the thing that you're trying to do, which is create the sound, create the music, focus on the sound, then you become directly connected to the sound. But here's the thing. That connection doesn't develop immediately if it's something that you haven't been using. It takes time and strategy to develop that connection, especially if it's something that, again, you haven't been doing. So, to facilitate this connection, what I started doing is I started thinking about, again, I started putting my attention on the music, on the sound, and just trying to create that sound. And I use something called a constraint. What is a constraint? A constraint is some sort of limit you're putting on what you're doing, okay? So the constraint that is most powerful for a musician, especially in this process, is going slow. Going slow is a constraint. So if you can focus on the sound, the outcome, and go slow enough to where you don't have to consciously control your movements, to where your movements are starting to happen on their own. Okay, this is self-organization. This is your body. Your body is self-organizing, and then it is coupling. Your body is coupling to the sound of the music that you are creating, right? So then all you need to do is you just use intention to create the music, make it sound how you want it to sound, go slow enough for your body to self-organize and couple. Now, if you go slow enough for long enough, then you can start going faster, right? And then you can start to use, instead of when you're playing, instead of having to think about all these physical things you have to do, you're just coupled. You're coupled with the sound. All you have to do is use your intention, use your imagination to make the sound how you want it to be, and your body will find a way to make it happen. Okay? So, but here's the thing. Every new piece of music you learn, like, even if you have like a really, even if you've gone slow, you've gone through all your scales in this way, you've built kind of like a new foundational technique. Even if you've done that, you're still going to want to, when you're learning a new piece of music, when you're practicing, you should be focusing on, am I self-organizing, am I coupling to the sound of this music? Am I able to play this without thinking of technique? Am I able to put my entire attention into the sound, into musical decisions, into the music? Okay? If you're not, slow down, use constraints. There's other constraints you can use as well, and you can, instead of going slow, you can do a shorter phrase. You just do a couple notes. You can do one note. You can just go between two notes. Okay, these are constraints. But don't micromanage your technique. The minute you get into micromanaging your technique, you're losing the connection, you're losing the self-organization, you're losing the coupling. That's the constrained action hypothesis, is when you micromanage your technique, it gets in the way and it causes issues. It makes it so that when you're trying to play music, when you play under pressure, you may be more likely to make mistakes because your technique is not coupled to the sound. So, a lot of times in performances, what may happen is you may be trying to focus on the sound in the performance and focus on the music, because we know that's what's important. We know that's what the audience is hearing, but because in the practice room you weren't focused on that, you didn't allow your technique to couple. Maybe you were more focused on your technique, or you just didn't go slow enough. Then when you get to that performance, your technique could fail you. right? This is something most of us have experienced. We think we know something, but then we get into a new environment and it just doesn't work like it did in the practice room, right? But take this approach, give this a try. Give self-organization a try. Give putting your attention on the music and going slow using constraints. Give that a try, see what happens. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes a little time to do that. But for me, I've seen the largest change in my playing, by doing this. And you'll find like teachers, great musicians, they kind of talk about this, but they don't talk about it directly. Maybe they didn't fully understand it, or maybe they were missing the language to really explain it clearly. Hopefully this is clear, but I think great musicians they're doing this whether or not they realize this is what they're doing. Great musicians aren't thinking about their technique. You can see them, like great soloists or great singers or whoever. You see them on the stage, they're not thinking about their technique. They're thinking about the music. And then they're capturing your attention with the music. They're thinking about all the musical decisions they want to make, the phrasing, the emotion they're trying to convey, the effect they're trying to create. Yeah. They're not thinking about the technique, because that's something they've figured out in the practice room. They've coupled the technique to the sound. They've allowed their body to self-organize. Yeah. So again, this idea, it comes from ecological dynamics. And it kind of came out of my research with memory too. It's funny, ecological dynamics does not like to talk about memory, but I do. I like to talk about memory. And I find, outside of coupling, right, self-organizing, which I think is one of the big things we should be doing in the practice room. That's where our focus should be. I think we can also be in the practice room with the intention of, we're building memory. We're building a memory of sound of what the piece of the music, right? We're building connections, that self-organization, that coupling connection between what our body is doing and what the music is, right? But all that is, again, we're building memory. So the music is memory, right? We have to remember what the music sounds like. Even if we're not memorizing the music, when we learn a new piece of music, some of us are good sight readers, some of us can sight read quite well, but it's rare. I don't think you would find anyone who plays better on the first run than the second run, right? The first run, you're just kind of learning it in real time, but the second time through, you're building on a memory, right? And the more you refine that memory, the more you refine that musical idea, the better the piece is getting, right? So again, in the practice room, what I'm thinking about these days is I'm thinking about coupling my physical technique to the sound that I want to create, and I'm thinking about memory. I'm thinking about building a memory for what it feels like to play it, but also, most importantly, what the music is, what I want the music to be, what I want it to sound like, how I want it to be phrased, how I want the emotions to come out, the feelings that I want to convey with the music. I'm trying to build a memory for that. And the cool thing when you start to think about it like memory, is we have a lot of research on memory techniques, right? And here's one of my favorite memory techniques that can be applied to music is, okay, well here's the thing, you've heard of repetition, right? You know, repetition is the kind of bread and butter of kind of musical teachers. We say, repeat it 10 times, you know, play it 10 times perfect or something like that. But why? Why repeat it? The reason you repeat the music is to build the memory. But here's the thing, if you don't realize that what you're doing is building memory, then your repetition could be aimed at the wrong thing. Because here's the thing, when you realize that music, you're building, when you're playing music, you're building memory, then you have to, you start to put more care into how you're practicing. It's not just repetition, right? You're trying to build an image of what this music should sound like, right? You're more careful. You don't want to build in mistakes or the wrong thing. You're trying to build it in the memory how you want it to be. You're creating like a sound image and you're trying to remember it, right? And you repeat it, right? But you only repeat it to the point to where you can hold it to where you've created like a solid image. And then with spaced repetition, you let go and come back to it another day. And that next day, or maybe it's the next day, maybe it's 2 days later, maybe it's 6 days later, maybe it's 7 days later, when you come back to it, your memory of it is going to be not as good, but it'll be better than when you started. But it won't be like how it was when you left off. But here's what you do. Then you work it up again. You build that image, that musical image that you want to create. You take it to an even higher level, right? You're using repetition to do this, but it's not mindless repetition. You're creating something. You're sculpting the music how you want it to be. And then you let go. And then you wait a couple more days. And then you come back to it again. And it's a little bit better than it was when you started last time, but it's not as good as it was when you finished last time. But it's, there's this progression that's happening. And what we know from research on memory is that spaced repetition like this takes memory from your short term and it brings it into your long term. And it's that space in between, that forgetting and then remembering again, that signals your mind. That's what signals your mind to move that memory into long-term memory, right? And that's what we want as musicians. Have you ever heard anyone talk about sleeping on it? You practice something and sleep on it. It's kind of like that, but a little bit different too. But here's the thing. When you start practicing with spaced repetition in mind, it changes how you approach everything. Like, you're not just, I just need to move my fingers through this a million times and then that must mean I'll learn it. And I don't think it works like that. No. It's about building a complete image of sound and fingers. Like we don't want muscle memory. Forget about muscle memory. Muscle memory means you don't have control. No. We want to be connected to the music. We want to be connected to the sound. We want to be making the music in real time. The music, not the fingers. the music. So when you use spaced repetition, this helps you get past muscle memory. It's not just repetition for repetition's sake, not just repetition for the fingers, right? This will help you become a better musician. It'll help you play at a higher level. Now, of course, here's, spaced repetition. Takes time, yeah. You can't learn something in one night at a high level. Not as well as you could if you gave it more time, yeah. Yeah, that's the downside, but it takes time either way. The cool thing is that when you play like this, when you combine this idea of music being memory, spaced repetition, you combine that with self-organization, coupling, focusing on the sound, allowing your body to self-organize. You combine those things, and it creates something that I've termed a direct musical connection. So direct musical connection is when you're able to perform or you're able to play music directly, where you're just, all your attention goes into creating the music how you want it, and you don't have to think about your technique. So you're directly connected to the music. Yeah, it's a cool feeling. And there's kind of another term for this, a more general term, but it's called flow. Flow is something that has also been studied a lot. And look it up. I mean, flow is amazing. You want flow in your life. And when you think about the best musicians, those musicians who are making like music that's inspiring, it's because they're in flow. Yeah. And they're sharing that with other people. It's really cool. And you can have access to flow consistently. It's not something like that has to be this thing that like only happens every now and then. You can build this into how you work and into what you do. You can be in flow every time you play an instrument, every time you touch the instrument, every time you engage with music, you can go into flow. And you can have a direct connection to the music that you're making. Yeah. It's pretty cool. And look, I'm still a work in progress. I only figured this stuff out within the past 2 years, and I'm still implementing this in myself. And, I have students that I teach as well. And I've shared this with them as well, and with colleagues, and, it's something that works for everybody, and something that anyone at any age can start doing. I mean, it's something that teachers can use. Sometimes just using different language as a teacher can help bring this out in your students. For an older musician, a more experienced musician, it's something that, once you understand this, it's something you can start implementing. And it can be transformative in many different ways. So if this is something that you're interested in, if you're something you want to learn more about, something you want to implement into yourself, I would say, there's a great book called, it's called How We Learn to Move, and it's all about ecological dynamics. It's by Rob, I'm forgetting his last name right now. Great guy though. He's got a podcast too. but it's all about sports. Nobody's really translated this to music yet. And so, you could definitely read that. Learning about flow is interesting. There's lots of information about flow. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is kind of like the founding father of flow research. He's got an interesting book on that as well. But yeah, so and the other thing is, if you'd like to learn more from me, I teach lessons, so I'd be happy to teach you a lesson online if you're not in the area. And if you happen to be in my area, I'd be happy to meet in person for lessons too. This is something that can be applied to any instrument, to voice. Honestly, it can be applied outside of music as well too. I mean, obviously it comes from the world of sports, but it can be applied to a lot of other things as well. It can be applied to dance, acting, cooking, all sorts of stuff. And I've got thoughts on how, on sports too, because I gotta say, I play basketball just for fun, but putting it into practice in basketball, very satisfying, loving it. But yeah, reach out to me if you'd like to, explore this more, if you have any questions. But yeah, I'd be happy to meet with you over like a video call or something like that and help you explore this, help you unlock this in your own playing. Because like I said, this has been transformational for me. I'm gonna try to, continue kind of sharing this information in some way. But, obviously there's some complexity to it. I think eventually it could be useful to have a book about this as well. We'll see. But yeah, I imagine that, other people would eventually, make this connection between ecological dynamics and music. Because like I said, it's huge in the sports world right now. It's what's starting to become big, right? But yeah, I have yet to see anything in the music world yet. So here I am, I'm happy to share everything I know about it. It's certainly an interest of mine, certainly something I'm implementing into my own playing. And yeah, I love talking about it. I think my family is probably tired of hearing me talk about it. So if you'd like to talk about it with me, I'd be happy to do so. Anyways, yeah, hopefully I will also have other information. If you follow my account, I will continue to share information about this as well. And again, leave a comment, ask any questions you might have. I'm sorry if I'm pacing. This is a very empty house we're in here. It's just a house we might be moving into. But we haven't quite moved our stuff yet. Anyways, yeah, I look forward to more discussions about this very interesting subject, direct musical connection.